Welcome to Energy Work and Healing. I'm Tricia George, an energy healer and intuitive guide, here to help you reconnect with your body, your energy, and your truth. This podcast is all about blending spiritual integrity with practicality, offering grounded insights, energy tools, and real conversations to support your healing journey. Whether you're just beginning or deep into your process, you are in the right place. Let's dive into this together. Welcome to the Energy Work and Healing podcast. I'm Tricia George, and here is where we actually blend spiritual integrity with practicality. And today we're going to be discussing the Sixth Chakra, where we move beyond the communication of the fifth chakra, our throat chakra, into clear seeing as we move up towards our brow. So the Sixth Chakra is all about how I see it as sunrise and sunset pictures. So let's talk a little bit about what it's contained of first. So the color for this chakra is indigo, and it actually has 96 cones, and it does have a front cone and a back cone. And the element of this chakra is light. And if we understand that it's located in the center of our forehead, about 1 inch above our brow line, and that the element here has to do with our pineal gland. And our pineal gland is a tiny little gland located in the middle of our head that I love to call the golden kernel. And it has to deal with our circadian rhythms of day and night. So in a sense, if we think about it, it's easy to remember that this is about clear seeing. We need to use a light in order to see clearly, and that's all about the pineal gland. And for myself, when I mention that it's the home of sunrise and sunset pictures, now I tend to read everything as a clock for many of you that know me. So it's going to be from 9 to 3, and that's our horizon. So sunrise is from 9 to noon, and then sunset is noon to 3. And that shows us really, in a sense, where we are heading regarding our next steps in our day-to-day life, or let's say diving into our future. So it reflects our clear vision and our clear seeing, and it assists us greatly with our manifestation space, which also has to do with the second, third, and our fifth chakra that we talked about in the last episode. So the sixth chakra, if we understand that this is where the recorder is, the recorder of all of our information. And if you think of your eyes as your projector or your camera, it's recording everything that you see and experience in your day-to-day life. This is also the area that's considered to be the record keeper, because just think about it. If your life is sort of like a mini series, right? And you have all these different series going on simultaneously, we're holding that and storing it similar to what we might store on our external hard drive, or what we're now calling the cloud for many of us. So we're actually holding that information in our space. And what happens is that's happening in the spirit, our spirit level, which is connected to the soul in this lifetime. And then a little speed up, fast forward. So that information, that record keeper in our sixth chakra, is going to take the information from this incarnation and actually blend it with the other incarnations that we've actually experienced in this current lifetime, as well as our previous lifetimes. So it's sort of a meshing or a melding of all the experiences that we have had in this lifetime. And then we're going to actually utilize that information. As I said, we're going to fast forward and we're going to bring it into our future, which is basically when we transition off this earth plane into our next incarnation. So I know that might be hard for some of you to grasp, but if you realize that as a soul, we have a collection, right? We have the book of life, and we have our Akashic records, which we're going to talk about in a later episode, but we're carrying that with us. So it's not a heavy book, right? We're ether, we're energy before we're a physical form. So we're carrying it through the energetics, just like when you would upload something to the cloud. It's very similar to that. So we want to understand that we are the creators of our world. What we choose to have, be, say, or do actually affects us in this present lifetime. And we're trying to merge our inner worlds and our outer worlds simultaneously, where we're trying to receive the information that merges into our mental, emotional, and physical bodies and merge it into our spirituality, bringing all four bodies together. This way, we can create our lives from fullness, from wholeness, or even if you want to consider it like a sense of being complete or fulfilled, that would be how we want to sort of play with our imagination in the sixth chakra. And when we understand that we have the capacity as a human being here on earth to create our potential outcomes through the use of our imagination, right? So we're using our imagining, we're imagining what something looks like. So we have to actually see something. Then we can begin to manifest. Because when we try to manifest and we don't hold it fully, like say your story, for example, might have a hook to it. Let's put it that way, where you see your manifestation, but at the end of your manifestation, you're like, but this is going to happen if I do it, and I'm going to fail. So that immediately lowers the vibration of the manifestation. So we want to have clear seeing, clear perception. And I love to use the sunrise sunset pictures because here, even though this is indigo for this chakra, if you think of it as like the void of the universe, right? That deep blue, dark, rich emollient sky that we look at every evening, and we integrate that with sunrise and sunset pictures, those can sort of become like a nebula or the cloud pictures that you can see. And how can you actually create from the clouds, from your experience, from everything that you're seeing within your screen that sort of sits in front of your space? So later on, much later on, we're going to be talking about a reading screen. And that's sort of where I'm going with this, is where you're becoming the producer, the director, and the filmographer of your story. And you're also the actor. So you're tying in all these elements of who you are to create who you're choosing to be as you move through your life. And if we see that we're moving actually closer towards us, not further away through our creations or our mock-ups, we begin to sort of use our seventh chakra, which is trusting our intuition and understanding that we are traveling our present path. And when we start talking about these higher chakras, so that's the sixth chakra, seventh, eighth, and ninth, what's happening here is that because they're subtle chakras, there's a lot more cones within each cone, and we're leaving our body again, just as we did in our 10th and 11th. But those two, remember, are connected to the earth. But when we do 6 through 9, we are connecting to the cosmic energy, to the universal source energy. And that's a much lighter, subtle experience. So you may have to sort of decide what subtle energy you're touching and where it's located, because the sixth will slightly enmesh with the seventh, eighth, and ninth because they sort of correlate to each other. They all are working in harmony in order to bring in cosmic energy so you can utilize it for your day-to-day life. And it's also to bring outward. So we're almost like a funnel from the sixth to the ninth, where we're allowing things to come to us through our havingness and our ability to receive with knowingness and with trust. So we're harnessing our power as a human being with a spirit and a soul, as well as the light around us. And we're allowing that light to enter us and allowing it to touch everything in and around us. And this is how we begin to shape and manifest through the imagination pathway. And by working with your inner light, which is very deep inside, right? The pineal gland. If you take your fingers and go about 2 inches above your ears, that's the beginning of where you're going to locate your pineal gland. And then you're going to also take your fingers and then move it to the back of your head to right about an inch above your brow. And that's how you're going to locate your pineal gland. And that's how you're working on also activating your pineal gland. And that we just have to remember that always deals with light energy. It's light. It's about being in rhythm with life on a day-to-day basis so we can actually illuminate as the human being we're meant to be. And when we are so comfortable with ourselves, we can actually share our light with others. And that might be to manifest, that might be through expressions, or just trying to gain a greater clarity of where we're going and how we want to engage in relationships with other people. So we're trying to integrate this working with our higher self, whether you call that the soul, whether you call it a combination of the soul of the spirit or what have you, you're trying to engage your higher self into your daily life while dwelling in this physical body. So, what does that do for us? When we are fully integrated and we're also operating from not our mind, right? We're not using the mind in the sixth chakra, but we're operating from our heart chakra. That allows us to move through love and light with everyone that we come in contact with, and as well as ourselves, because we're integrating, we're becoming one with all that is. Now, that's not to say that the sixth chakra can go into surplus or shortage just like the other chakras can, and it definitely can. And this might be where instead of seeing sunrise and sunset pictures when I'm reading somebody, I might see like a fog, a smoky mist, or like a cloud energy or some blackened energy where the black might even just like lay right where their forehead is. And that creates interference and distorts our reality through the sixth chakra because we're not getting the information that is our own in a way. We're second guessing ourselves. We're not trusting through the seventh that what we're seeing through our clear seeing is actually possible or can happen. So this might cause us to become uncertain, confused, misaligned. It may be difficult to actually manifest where you feel like no matter what you do or what you're choosing to have, every time you go to reach for it, it actually gets further and further away from you. That's a sixth chakra issue because there's a part of you that's not having it at 100%. So what'll happen is you have a great idea, right? So say maybe you want to have, a new decision to become self-employed and you want to have your own career. So you're going to start to develop that trajectory to move forward into having your new career. But then you sort of fizzle out midway through. Maybe you get the name of it and the business and you have your logo, but then you just give up. You fizzle out. The energy disappears from it and it never gets momentum again because unconsciously through your subconscious mind, there's a part of you that's saying you can't have it. And that can be that gray energy that you're actually witnessing, or I'm witnessing when I'm reading my clients in the sixth chakra. So, and what happens there is a lot of times there's just a lack of self worth or self esteem. Um, Maybe they feel like they cannot receive what they truly desire to have in their life, and they have a hard time raising their vibration. So they might tank all the way down to, say, 20 hertz, which is shame, instead of staying in alignment with themselves at 200 hertz, which is courage. And I'm going to keep using those two analogies over and over again, because how can we sort of clear the negative energies, clear the clouds, clear the fog and the smoke, and allow ourselves permission to walk on our life path? Because what happens if we don't give ourselves permission to have it, it stops us from sort of jumping in and embracing our future and trusting, right, that everything is happening for us through our day-to-day experiences. And even when we might not receive something, can you look beyond that present moment and saying, okay, if I'm not getting this, say this new job or this new relationship, maybe it's because there's something better waiting for me, rather than sort of going in regression and sort of sulking or being sad that you didn't receive something. How can you overcome and adapt and allow yourself the permission to keep striving forward rather than looking down or beyond you? So we want to understand, when we're working with the sixth chakra, I would say the biggest word that I would integrate into this is clarity. We want to have clarity for what we are choosing to experience in our day-to-day lives. And this is beyond discontent. This is beyond thinking that our lives are being dictated by somebody else, because you're in the driver's seat. You're driving the vehicle. Nobody else is doing that. You're in control. And if you're discontent or you feel like you'll never get what you desire, that's your story. You're creating that. I would say turn the page and start the story over again, where you're not holding on to limited beliefs or strongholds or blocks or other people's information in your space. Be clear about your intentions and what you're creating and how you're choosing to manifest, because that's when we develop and we obtain our sort of next steps in life, where we are giving permission as well as having non-attachment. And we're sort of quieting all the distractions and the noise and other people's information so we can have a clear picture of what we choose to have in our daily lives, in our energy bodies. Because remember, your energy bodies, yes, of course, we engage with other energy bodies all the time, probably 24/7 in a day, even when we're sleeping sometimes, So, but how can we have ownership of our space? Because once we have ownership and we're authentic and we trust that everything's working, then we can have things without attachment. So, what do I mean by that? So, if you have one thought of creation, let's just say, I don't know, let's just say we want to create a new car. And you don't really give a lot of information. You just know you want a new car, however that new car is going to manifest for you. But you didn't add your details, right? You didn't come in here and you didn't have your little mini series of what kind of car it might be. Maybe you didn't do your research, but something came to you. Let's just say your uncle or your friend said, "Oh, I'm getting rid of this car. Do you want this car?" And you're like, "Oh, that's interesting that came through." Now, you can say to yourself, if you get an intuitive hit, I think I'm going to pass on this one and I'm going to wait for the next one, right? Because you realize that when they're giving you the car, it's not what you considered to be a new car. But you can have gratitude and thankfulness and thank the universe for sort of showing you how you can obtain something as a gift, right? It doesn't always have to be a monetary way of acquiring. So, or you can just take that car and have it and have full gratitude that you received this vehicle as a gift from an individual that actually loves and considers who you are. And that's what I mean by your story. You have the ability, through the use of your own intuition, through the signs and symbols you get from the way your life unfolds, to actually receive. And how can you embrace that space and allow it to sort of like unfold before you without attachment? Now, say you wait and you decide to wait on that car. It's not necessarily happening in the timeline that you want it to happen in. Sometimes things happen at God's speed and it's super quick. Other times, there's a few things that have to get done in the meantime. Maybe you have to learn how to budget your money financially in order to obtain a car that would have maybe a car payment, or you would need the money down. So, but by slowing yourself down and pacing yourself, maybe that's a method that you're choosing so you can be independent of other people. Because who knows, maybe your uncle would have an agenda. I'm just making it all up right now. But you know what I'm saying is, like, you have choices. You have to recognize and begin to trust through your heart, through your sixth, through your knowingness, how things are coming into your life. And when you're on your path and when you're off your path, because we don't want to miss an experience, or we don't want to miss a chance or an opportunity to actually gather and collect what we know we've been manifesting and working on. And that's when things just sort of fall into place, when it's like serendipity, when life just seems to unfold. That perfect person comes in your life at the perfect time, whether it's someone for your career or for your relationship. Everything starts to fall right into place. So we want to trust that. And we want to work on that pineal gland that sits in the center of our head, right? So you can always do that exercise, an inch or two above your temples, and then center of head and back of head. And by doing this exercise, just by doing this alone, you're activating that pineal gland. And it's like a muscle, just like a muscle in your body. You have to work at it to strengthen it. And the same holds true for your pineal gland. So the more you strengthen it, the more you work with it, it's going to be able to show you through visualizations, through signs, clear pictures, your mini series, what have you, that you can have different choices in your life through perceptions, through the imagination pathway. And we can allow this to expand and sort of breathe like our lungs. That way, we're sort of pumping or priming the pineal gland, and we're allowing it to ebb and flow. We're allowing it to move. That way, we're strengthening that center. So when we come into a mindful state or a state of meditation, let's just say, and we tap our third eye and we ask our higher self, our soul, right, to show us a clear picture or a clear direction for our next steps in our sixth chakra, we can project on our screen and just look at what starts to unfold before us. Maybe you see a scene taking place. Maybe you see people. Maybe there's certain people in your life that are coming into the scene as actors. But then you get to actually work in that space. And that's where you're going to create from. And that's where you're going to have the opportunity to grow. Now, just like a chakra can be in surplus or shortage, the pineal gland can also be in a sort of shortage state where it's not a golden kernel. And I love 24 karat gold as the analogy for that. Like, you want a bright, sunshiny 24 karat gold pineal gland. That's your vision. That's your mock up. But sometimes when we don't give it attention, or we stop trusting our intuition and it's been a while, we have to work at it. Because what happens is it gets suppressed, and it can also get suppressed by things that we ingest into our body. toothpaste is high in fluoride, and fluoride can affect our pineal gland. It can actually like calcify it. Also, antidepressants can all leave sort of like a heavy film in our space. And when I read somebody that's on antidepressants, it's almost like there's an emptiness in their sixth chakra, and the sixth in the back is sort of closed, where they're not having visual pictures anymore. It's like they ran out of film for their video camera, and it'll be like a quiet space, but it's empty at the same time. And this can also show up as like a grayish matter in someone's auric field, where you're actually feeling that sort of depression energy, but you know that it's being filtered by something. So it's creating like a haze that will sort of sit in the fourth, fifth, or maybe sixth auric layer in front of them. So it just depends on how you receive your pictures. As a clairvoyant, you always have your own sort of symbols and signs and pictures. So for me, when I see depressant or antidepressants in someone's body, I'll definitely see it floating in their auric field like a gray film. And then I'll see this like lost sort of hollow energy as if their sixth chakra is empty. And that's because the pineal gland isn't working properly. It's not really holding the space that that individual needs, in order to produce their manifestations or their next steps. But just understand that you can strengthen this gland. It's just like anything else. And it becomes like muscle memory when you start getting used to it. So we want to have an awareness of that. And when we awaken to that and allow that to start being our operating system and set intentions in this space and practice connecting with ourselves, as well as this little golden kernel of light, we can actually start to move much more readily and quickly in our day-to-day life. For myself, with the sixth chakra, I consider it, yes, it's the center of the head, but it's also the location where our spirit resides. So for me, I see our soul sort of sitting right here in our suprasternal notch. And that's where our physical soul is, even though the soul chakra is 3 feet above our head on the ninth chakra. But for me, the spirit is sort of sitting within the sixth chakra. Now, this is just how I've interpreted it with my guides and my own information when I meditate. But we want to understand that this interaction, this pulsation that's happening with all this subtle energy, is where we can actually connect to ourselves in a higher form and help our spirit through the use of our soul by integrating all the information that we're receiving from the sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. This way, we actually can manifest using our screen or our hologram. You might see someone saying it like that, or even like a mirror pathway, So we just want to have that understanding that there's this connection between who we are. And when we really begin to master our clairvoyance, our clear seeing through this chakra, we can see it where it has more dimension than just a piece of paper. So, what do I mean by that? So, say we have our eyes closed and we're projecting an image on our screen. Let's just use a rose for an example. You might just tap a little bit forward and see the image of a rose in your mind's eye, and your eyes are projecting it, even though they're closed, out onto your reading screen. And then you're seeing this 3-dimensional rose, and you're going to notice the color. You're going to notice the density of the petals. Can you see the inner stamen? Can you spin your rose? Can you see your rose hip? Can you see your stem? Are there any branches or roots? Or maybe thorns? But you should be able to visualize that in a 3-dimensional image. And that's the fun part. That's where it gets nice and juicy because it becomes sort of alive in your mind's eye. And then the mind's eye says, oh, it's already manifested. It's already here. So you can bring it into your reality. So when we talk about shortage and imbalances or surpluses or excess in this chakra, it really affects our central nervous system. Because if you understand that the central nervous system is running down the back of the chakra, it could also affect your eyes through your optic nerves. It can affect your femoral nerves, depending on what's happening. You could also experience um, developmental issues, sleeping disorders, and it's just relative to how you process your information. But that central nervous system, we just want to remember that all the glands, all this information is connecting to that central nervous system. So we want this to have sort of an ease and grace as we're allowing energy to move in and through our bodies. And we also want to remember when it's in surplus or shortage, we'll learn about that while we also learn when we're in alignment. So, what do I mean by that? We're going to need to learn how the sixth chakra operates in surplus, how it operates in shortage, and how it operates when it's in alignment with itself. So we've already sort of spoken about when it's in alignment with itself, but when it's in a surplus, you might actually have visions, right, of it being sort of like a daydream space where you zone out of your body. You actually leave your physical body because you don't want to deal with something. Or you can have a sort of avoidance or escapism. And if that chakra is about 2 feet in diameter, instead of that healthy 4 to 6 inches in diameter, 6 to 8 inches in diameter, depending on what you're doing, you might find yourselves like imbalanced because you're deeply immersed in this sort of fantasy world where you're no longer in your reality, and that distance or that disconnect stops you from actually living within your actual reality. So the daydreaming or the zoning out or the avoidance energy will actually pull you out of your day-to-day life because you're unconscious. You're walking around not in your present moment. You're walking around sort of in the space of, I don't want to be here. This is way too heavy. So I'm jumping out. I'm hitting the road. I'm going to go invent some dragon and I'm going to take a ride on a dragon instead. And that's when we need to understand that by seeking refuge within reality through our dream space is a lot different than our imagination pathway. And until you start practicing that, it's going to be a little bit challenging to figure out when you're just daydreaming or when you're manifesting. So we need to create separations because if we just think of the consideration of the dragon, right? Like you really don't see a dragon in physical 3D reality, maybe in a fourth or fifth D reality, but not in the earthbound one. So that would sort of say to you, okay, that I got to come back to earth. I got to get back into my feet. I got to ground my energy and get rid of these mental distractions that I'm creating in order to avoid my day-to-day life. Because what we do there is we sort of create all these distractions as coping mechanisms. And that temporarily allows us to escape, but it's not really fulfilling anything in the present lifetime. If anything, it's sort of slowing us down or making it sluggish. So we want to be very careful that we're not zoning out and that we're staying in that sense of conscious awareness with ourselves because we want to transcend our limitations through the sixth chakra. And when we have sort of these perceptions that can be like really exaggerated, it could also throw us in the other sort of direction where we become very self-absorbed, very ego-based, maybe narcissist energy would be here, where the self-image is so inflated. And this is just another example of being in excess. You know, it's as if, yes, we do have connections to God or the source or the divine, but we are also having a human experience at the same time. So that should remind us to sort of stay humble, but we don't want to have a sort of complex where we're superior to another human being, because that's when we're sitting in our ego, and that's a a really imbalanced ego in our third chakra, and we're just conveying it through our sixth. We sort of ignore the heart at that point, because it's all about the person. It's all about the narcissist or the person with the very inflated, self-perception. So we want to be understanding about that and keep our humility, keep our honor and our integrity with ourselves, and not really operate from a place that um, puts us above other people. So because those people will put their needs above anyone else for first and foremost, but that's not necessarily healthy, because they're not taking into consideration other people, other sort of moral compasses that they might have. And it's a really sort of selfish behavior. And I think when we're in that space, we really are just living within our ego and not being considerate of the people in the world around us. And it's sort of detrimental because we lack empathy then. And the unwillingness to engage or compromise or balance. And it's very dismissive of other people in a way, and it can be very painful, not only to the person that's the receiver, but the giver as well. Because if you notice, many of those people will have like a heart wall because the heart's closed off, because they're not permeable there. And the pain body's so great here that it really goes from the third all the way to the sixth without engaging with the other chakras. And in the long term, it's detrimental, I think, to the spirit and the soul in a way, because it affects who you are and how you choose to show up. And it can begin to erode your relationships in your life, create toxic spaces in your workspace, and people will try to avoid you in a way, like they won't want to be around you because what you're projecting out to the world. So we want to sort of understand and recognize that excess can show up in multiple ways, as well as the shortages. And many times with shortages, the first thing you're going to see here is depression, and where they have a lot of vulnerabilities. Maybe there's a lot of negative self-talk where they don't believe in themselves. They actually don't trust their own information, and they have themselves almost like a martyr, right? Where they're constantly struggling with this shortage here, this sort of imbalance. And the depression energy can get so heavy in someone's space, and it's like you're being constantly bombarded by everything that's happening to you throughout the day. And what I mean by that is, like, one person could say one thing and you take it personally, and then something else happens at work, you take it personally. So you're constantly getting these hits to your front heart, to your back heart, and this leaves you in a sort of like a vulnerable state of stress, is what I'll say, because it's almost like you're abusing yourself by absorbing all this other energy that tells your sixth chakra that you can't have something, that you can't receive, and that you're not worthy to have it. So we want to understand that the shortage in the sixth chakra is all about neglect. And we want to understand that this will translate into a future where we're not going to be very happy. We might be living in a container, or we might keep ourselves safe, right, through our soul, through our ninth chakra, by staying in the same space, in the same job, in the same location, going to the same stores in the same week, same time frame, right? Where we stay in a fixed pattern. And that fixed pattern causes suppression, complacency, and a shortage in that chakra. And that creates a sort of numbness in our emotional state. And that also will show up as fog or misperceptions or like a mist within the auric field because they're not able to envision their sunrise or sunset pictures. They can't see the brighter side of the street. Let's just say it that way. They can't see the rainbow. So it becomes a horrible challenge for them to get out of their funk. And what happens is it affects the seventh, eighth, ninth chakra because they have a lack of trust and faith in the seventh. Their book of life sort of stays still because they're stuck in a pattern. They're not able to break out of this pattern, similar to like the Groundhog Day movie with Bill Murray, right? Where it's same pattern happening over and over again because they're not learning anything. And then the soul is just there. It's existing, but there's no living experience for the spirit. There's no thriving. There's no receiving of information. So we want to be very aware of when we're in surplus versus when we're in shortage. Because if you understand that all your experiences that you're meant to have are opportunities, and you're just here to jump into them, to experience them, and why put roadblocks on your path? Why not just take the steps towards growth and fulfillment for yourself? So that way you can be, do, and have whatever you choose to experience in this lifetime. A great tool that I love to use is sometimes we're just afraid to do it alone. And we're really never alone. We might be lonely, but we're not alone. So a nice little tool, and this is something I use often and I've taught a lot of my clients, is envision a spirit guide team and allow that spirit guide team to work with you throughout your day. Now, what do I mean by that? So say you have an insecurity of trying something new, and maybe you were invited to an event with a lot of people that you're not going to know. So set up your spirit team. You can have a spirit guide in front of you, behind you, to the left and to the right of you, as well as above you. And what do I mean by that? So I love the vision of a hawk always flying above my head. So for clear seeing, it brings me higher through my higher sense perception, as the hawk can actually move further than I and can see what's coming. So it becomes a witness, in a sense, to my own life. And then maybe I have my two guides on my either side of me that are my protector guides. I have my master healer in front of me, and I have my other guides behind me. And we're all walking in unison together because we are not alone in this life. And as long as we remember that and allow ourselves to have it and experience it using our imagination pathway, connecting our guides to us through our auric field, and moving in harmony together, we could actually accomplish something that was really fearful to experience when we're on our own. And that's just a little idea. There's so many tools out there that you can utilize through your knowingness, through your clairvoyance, through your clairaudience, clairsentience. And how can you allow yourself permission, right, through self-worth, to allow your movies to unfold? Allow the projections to show up. And the good thing about it is that what you manifest doesn't happen right away. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lag because sometimes we might not be manifesting the best possible outcome for us. Other times it'll happen in a blink of an eye. And it just depends on the intention and how you choose to show up. So you can give it a try, activate that sixth chakra a few times during your day. Even if you don't want to do the 4-point test, you could just touch your third eye and activate it so you're in your consciousness. You're in conscious awareness. You're in your physical body as a spirit and a soul working in conjunction with each other. I hope you enjoyed this podcast regarding the sixth chakra. The next podcast will be about the seventh chakra, which is all about our knowingness and connection to source energy, God, cosmic energy, whatever you want to name it. And I'm excited to go higher with you into the chakras. That way we could start diving into the other subtle energy bodies. Till then, have a great day. Enjoy yourself. If you liked this episode, please like and share, and maybe share it with somebody else that might need to hear something that you heard in this episode. Take care. Thank you for joining me on Energy Work and Healing. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, share it with someone who might need it, and leave a review. Remember, your energy matters, and your healing helps heal the world. Here, we honor the path of blending spiritual integrity with practicality so you can walk empowered, aware, and aligned. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep listening to the wisdom found within.